Hey everybody, today I am taking a look at Sea Salt and Paper, which is a very small box card game designed by Bruno Cathala and T. Riviere. This one accommodates 2 to 4 players and takes around 30 minutes to play, according to the box. Now, before I get started on my review of Sea Salt and Paper, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. So, Sea Salt and Paper is a set collection card game where you're trying to get the most points by collecting cards not only in your hand but also play cards out in the table. So your combined score between the two will be your final score for the round. You're going to keep on playing rounds until you've reached a set amount of points depending on the player count. Now, the setup is very simple. You're going to give the deck of cards a shuffle. You're going to reveal 2, which are going to be the 2 discard piles. Now, on your turn, you can do one of 2 things in ways of acquiring cards. You can draw 2 and then put one of them back on one of the discard piles. So in this example, I've drawn 2 very similar cards there. So I might want to put this one here and keep this one in my hand. Now, the other option is to draw a card from one of the discard piles, and you have to draw the top card if you are doing that. Now, there are a bunch of different cards available, which I've put a few out here. Now, generally speaking, a lot of the cards will have these abilities in the top left-hand corner. So you've got these crabs, the fish, the boats, and also the shark and swimmer. Now, when you acquire these cards, if you have a pair of them, then after you've drawn your card, you can actually choose to play as many pairs of cards as you want and get a special power. Now, the special powers will let you either go through the discard piles and pick one of those cards. It will let you pick a card off the top of the deck. It will let you get a back-to-back turn, or it will let you steal a card off another player. Also, when you play a pair of cards, they'll be worth an extra point at the end of the game. Now, let's have a look at some of the other cards available here. So there are actually 4 of these mermaid cards. Now, these mermaid cards will give you a point for your most numerous coloured suit in your hand. So if I had, say, 4 of these dark blue cards, that would be an extra 4 points. And if I collected more of these mermaid cards, then it would go down to my next strongest suit, and so on. Now, there's also a shoot the moon scoring system, where if you have 4 of these mermaid cards and you play them, then you'll instantly win the game. Now, other cards include these set collection cards. You have these penguins, you have these shells, these octopuses or octopi, and also you have these anchor cards, which I've not put out here. And these will score you simple set collection bonuses. You can see here, 1 penguin is going to be worth 1 point. 3 penguins are going to be worth 5 points. And you can see that in the bottom right-hand corner, you have the number of cards in your hand there. So, you've got to have all of them to get to those higher amount of points. And the shells, you can get up to 10 points if you collect 6 of them. And the octopi, you will collect up to 5 of them for a massive 12 points. Now, on top of those set collection cards, you actually have these booster cards as well, which will give you some additional points depending on the different types of cards you have in your hand. Like in this example, I'll get 2 points for every penguin card I have. So, if I had all 3 of these and this one, then that's quite a few points there. So after you've drawn your card and you've played as many of these duo cards as you want, you optionally can choose to end the round. And when you end the round, you have one of 2 options. You can either say stop, where each player will stop and just score the cards you have not only played in front of you as well as the cards you have in your hand. But you can also do what's called a last chance. And in this example, every other player will have 1 extra turn before they reveal their cards. Now, in this example, you are somewhat wagering on yourself to be the strongest player and have the most points, because if you have the most points by the time everybody's had their final turn, you will score all of the cards in your hand and played in front of you, as well as your strongest colour of suit that you have in front of you, a point for each of those. But your opponents will only score their strongest suit in terms of the colours they have. So, it's a big gamble, but you can potentially really hinder your opponent's scoring some points. If you are not correct in wagering in yourself, as in you thought you'd have the most points, but somebody actually had more points than you, then you only score your colour bonus, but all the opponents score the points on their cards. So again, a big gamble, and it could pay off or it could not pay off. And as I said, you're going to keep on playing these rounds, having to shuffle the deck in between them, and you're going to keep on playing until you reach a certain amount of points depending on the player count. So in a 2-player game, it'll be the first to 40 points. In a 3-player game, it'll be 35 points, and in a 4-player game, it will be 30 points. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on sea salt and paper. Let's start with some of the scoring. I actually do quite enjoy this idea of not only the cards you've played in front of you scoring, if you have the pairs of them, of course, but also the cards in your hand scoring. So it adds some murkiness into how well each player is doing, which of course will tie in to that end of round trigger, which is kind of one of the quirky rules of this game. Have I got enough confidence to bet on myself to think, I'm doing well here, let's call the end of the round and hopefully I can hinder everybody scoring all those points? Or you might think, I'm not doing so well, I think my opponents are really pulling away, therefore I'm going to call the end of the round and we'll just score the points we have and we'll start again with a whole fresh rack of cards. Now, I have seen this mechanism used before in a game called Cabo, and I think in that game it is pulled off to an exceptional standard, and it is a really exciting part of the game. Now, I do like it here, but I feel like the actual scoring condition is a little bit clunky and even confusing initially. You think, am I going to, if I bet on myself, then if I'm correct, then I will score all my points plus my colour bonus, but only my opponents will score their colour bonus. If I'm incorrect, I will score just my colour bonus, but my opponents will score their points. Now, that's not the most intuitive of rules. Maybe it should have been a kind of all or nothing thing. I'm not quite sure. In respect of that, I do like the fact that the more information you reveal, or the more kind of powers you're utilising, you are showcasing the cards that you have. While these powers are pretty decent in terms of drawing exact cards that you want, which can of course really boost the set collection cards, or just drawing another card off the top of the deck. Getting another turn to get more cards is of course very important, or even getting a lucky dip by diving into someone's hand, which when things like if you have say 2 or 3 of the mermaids, doing a lucky dip into someone's hand and snatching a card off them can be quite exciting, especially if you know that they've picked up a mermaid off one of those discard piles. I do really like this shoot the moon mechanism. Now, I've not actually managed to pull that move off or seen it done, but we've come very close before, and even if you almost tunnel vision yourself into picking up these mermaids, even if you don't manage to achieve that, they are still worth quite a few points on their own, because again, if you are really stockpiling a certain colour, then you're going to get a point for your best colour there. So again, these are very a strong card in the game. I do really enjoy how fast the turns are here. The actions you take are pretty rapid, just drawing cards and then just smashing a few pairs down. And a lot of the time you don't even have a pair, so your turn is over pretty quickly, and you're not just sat there waiting for somebody to take these long, elaborate turns. Now, that being said, I do think the game does drag its heels a bit in terms of its length, and because the length is kind of undetermined, and it is player driven, sometimes these rounds can outstay their welcome, and it feels like, is this a fast game or not? I'm not quite sure. So I do think the potential for this game to go too long is quite a significant factor, especially when you are playing out over several rounds. And I've even had to house rule that by saying, we're going to play 2 rounds. Whoever's got the most points out of those 2 rounds will be the victor, regardless or not if we hit that official rule of hitting a certain amount of points. I think maybe this could have been fixed by starting with a couple of cards in your hand, because you do start each round with nothing. So maybe that's a small house rule that you could actually fix yourself. The player interaction in this game is fine. You are sometimes competing over the same cards. Again, you do have the the swimmer and the shark cards, where you can do steal cards of other players, which doesn't actually feel too bad in this game. I don't generally take that mechanisms, but it's fine here because you do need to have a pair. But I do feel like it does scale best at 2 players. I think when you start adding that third or fourth player in, it gets a little bit wild in terms of the discard piles. And I do like the fact there's 2 discard piles here. But if you are playing with, again, that 3 or 4 player count, the chances of a card remaining there by the time it's back to your turn is quite slim, and that can get quite frustrating. So I actually do think that the game scales best at 2 players for that reason, and also that the scoring is a bit more simple, where you only have to wager on yourself to beat 1 player rather than an extra 2 or 3 players. The production for this game is fine. It is in a very small box, which is always a welcome thing. The card stock is adequate. They're not linen finish. Really a pretty cheap feeling card, but the game is cheap in itself, so I can't really blame them for that. In terms of the actual artwork, I think it looks wonderful. All these kind of origami style images, that's really clever, and it looks quite distinct to a lot of other games out there, so I definitely like that. They've done a good job for the symbology. They've also done a good job of using colorblind friendly symbols here, which is definitely a welcome addition for me. So no complaints really, not the best quality, but it is a very small box and it is pretty affordable. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Sea Salt and Paper. Now this game actually did intrigue me quite a lot because it's got a bit of a cult following, it's got some traction, and it definitely has its fans. Now sadly I have to say that I'm not a huge fan of this game, and don't get me wrong, I think it's probably slightly better than average and it definitely has some redeeming features, but I think the issues I have with it outweigh those positives. Number one, I do think the game is too long. It does really drag its heels, and you kind of feel like you're just going through the motions and not really knowing with any concrete evidence when you should end the round. And I do really like that mechanism. As I said, I've seen it used before in a game called Cabo, and that's the best part of that game. And I think if you like that mechanism, definitely check out Cabo, a simple memory game. I do like the fact that you are playing these powers out, giving a bit more information about how many points you have, but getting quite a strong ability at the same time. Holding back these set collection cards in your hand, and you could reveal a bunch of them at the same time, using a bit of memory to track what other people are going for, maybe trying to cover up those cards. But all of these things, they're not quite enough to, again, counteract how long the game takes, and just how woolly and clunky that end of round scoring feels. So I think if I'm going to play a simple card game, a simple set collection one, I'll probably play something like Coloretto or something like Parade over games like Sea Salt and Paper. I really love the look of this one. It has a very distinct visual design here, which is very nice to look at. I do like the shoot the moon mechanism, but overall I think it's just average. I really am not overly impressed by it, which I'm quite sad by because I do love a good small box card game. So I definitely think this is going to have its fans, and it clearly has done. And there are certainly cool things here, but ultimately I have other games like the aforementioned Parade and Coloretto that I would rather play over Sea Salt and Paper.